Welcome to Judaism Demystified, a podcast for the perplexed. Join us as we explore some of the most fascinating Jewish and Torah-related topics with our esteemed guests. By tackling some of the biggest questions you likely won't find addressed elsewhere, we aim to shed light on important issues and inspire a return to the fundamentals. Enjoy the show. Thank you for joining the Judaism Demystified podcast. This is a very challenging time in Jewish history, so we appreciate you making the time to discuss something that's very sensitive and important. And we'll just begin with this. The attacks on October 7th were traumatic and transformative for Jews worldwide, particularly those in Israel. Following these events, you have been more vocal on social media about issues within the Haredi community, concerns that you were previously more hesitant to express. It is strikingly apparent now how, for the most part, religious leadership has failed to contribute meaningful insights, reflections, and ideas to guide us through these times and beyond. In fact, it's the everyday people, like the influencers, who have taken the role of leadership and advocacy. How did the events of October 7th influence your decision to speak out more openly, and why do you believe this moment has changed your approach?
Okay, so and first of all, thank you for inviting me to this podcast. I'm actually I appreciate the opportunity to reach out to your audience, and I think that question is an important question, and I'd like to unpack it because it's a bit complex, right? But there is this idea that many Jews have had for the last few decades, and especially since the Six-Day War, because in the Six-Day War, the state of Israel was really in a sense of mortal danger. There was a sense of mortal danger in the country, and people were preparing for the worst, and nothing bad happened. Thank God. There were miracles. And not only that, but we actually expanded the land of Israel, and we conquered Yehuda v'Shomron, the Golan, the Sinai Desert. So because of that experience and similar experiences over the course of the history, the modern history of the modern state of Israel, there's been this kind of like attitude, nothing bad can really happen. God is protecting us, which is all true. So of course, I believe that. I still believe that. But here's the thing. What October 7th showed us, and I will explain in some detail, is that yes, God protects us from our enemies, but God does not protect us from our stupidity. And it's important to understand that. Meaning, Hashem, and God does so many miracles for Am Yisrael. But I think it was Harambam who said that if a person acts in a stupid way, but then there'll be consequences to acting in a stupid way. So all the miracles in the world are great and they're wonderful, and yet we can still screw it up. And when I say screw it up, and I want to read to you a verse from Yeshaya, because this really goes to what I was feeling after October 7th. This is chapter 29 in the book of Isaiah. The pasuk says, "Hitmahamehu utmahu." Now Isaiah is describing a calamity, contemporary calamity that was taking place in his days. Namely, the king of Assyria, Haredim, was coming to Jerusalem. And he's describing some calamity where Sanherib is about to conquer Jerusalem. Some people say it's talking about that. That's a consensus. Other people say, no, it's talking about the future, Gog and Magog. Okay. But what he says, what Yeshaya says is, Itma'me'u. This calamity is taking place. Stop and ponder. And then he says, Utmahu. And if you ponder, you will be shocked, because you will be thinking and you will understand what happened. And then hishta'ashru means you will wake up. Vasho'u, and then you have an obligation to wake up others. I was pondering about October 7th, and it shook me to the core. And I woke up, and I want to wake up others. And let me tell you what I was thinking about. So going back to that idea, nothing bad can happen to the Jewish people. We're in Israel, there's miracles happening. And I realized we were wrong, and it shocked me, right? Because it means that we can really mess it up, meaning we messed up so badly on October 7th, and God forbid, if we don't learn the lesson, we can mess up again. Now, when you think about it, what happened, what led to October 7th was a series of historical mistakes by Am Yisrael, by our leaders. Let me look at this from a logical perspective and then from a religious, theological perspective. And I think it's important to do that. Think about Oslo. The premise of Oslo was that the Jewish people, we will bring into the land of Israel. This is in the 90s, right? 1994. So we bring into the land of Israel terrorists who murdered Jews. Yasser Arafat, he was the number one terrorist. He was already in exile. He was in Tunisia. Let's bring him back. Let's bring him to Israel. Let's forgive him for all the murders of the Jews. Let's give him weapons. Let's give him land. And somehow everything will work out. It'll all be good. That was Oslo, 1994. And then there was a series of other similar events. There was Oslo 2. Then there was finally the culmination was when we, in 2005, the disengagement from Gaza, where again, this time we just ran away from Gaza and said, everything will be great. This will work out. There will finally be peace. So here we see a series of historical events. So let's ponder about that. That's what I did. So you ready to ponder? Okay. Let's say a person, he sees a purse. There's a purse on the table. It doesn't belong to him. It has money in it. So now he wants the money. Is it moral to take the money? No. Now, as a rabbi, from a theological perspective, I believe that if he takes the money, no benefit will come from taking the money. Meaning, if you do an evil act, no good will come to the people, to the person or to people who do evil, right? But you think about it, this person may not have a theological or moral compass, and he say, you know, I want the money. I know that if I take the money, it'll be in my hand. I have it. So logically speaking, he just took the money. He has the money, let's say $100, and it's here. Don't bring theology to me. Okay, so this person is conflicted. There is the morality of the action. He doesn't care about it, but he does care about the logical aspect is, I just got the money. So I can't excuse that, but I can understand that people do bad things and people don't always act in accordance with morality and in accordance with theology. People do bad things. And I believe nobody gets away with anything. Always, I believe that a bad act will never bring good onto a person. Okay? Let's think about Oslo. Jews were getting murdered. Arafat murdered thousands of Jews in cold blood. In 1974, for those of you who don't know, just to give you a little history, his henchmen took over a school in northern Israel, in Ma'alot. They massacred 23 school children. I'm just bringing this because it's so horrific, and I want people to understand this is a really bad person. Now, from a theological perspective, now let's fast forward from 1974, and over the 1970s, there were many terrorist incidents, and eventually he was exiled to Tunisia, as I said. But let's think of this from a theological perspective. Who thinks that rewarding Arafat for the murder of thousands of Jews will bring a blessing upon the Jewish people? Who thinks that? Well, I mean, I think you have to be godless to believe that, right? I mean, anybody who thinks that, oh yeah, we'll bring Arafat, this is a great idea. Let's bring this murderer. Let's bring him and his henchmen who were exiled from, they were thrown out of Jordan, they were thrown out of Lebanon. Nobody wanted them. They were thrown out of Lebanon, right? Nobody wanted them because wherever they went, they made trouble, right? They murdered thousands of Jews, ruthless brutality, right? Who thinks in his right mind, hey, great idea. Let's reward him by making him the head of the Palestinian Authority, giving him a Nobel Peace Prize, giving him weapons, giving him money, giving him international legitimacy, bring him into Israel. It's all going to be great. So from a theological perspective, as a rabbi, I found this to be an abomination. But here's the thing. I dare keep my mouth shut because many rabbis, far greater than me, said, no, this is great. There was a rabbi in Sha'arei Sion, Rabbi H. He eventually lost his job. He was thrown out of the synagogue because he was against Oslo, because he saw the abomination for what it was. Other rabbis turned against him from Israel, from the Shas party. And I keep asking myself, who are these religious figures that don't understand that committing an immoral act, committing a travesty, forgiving the death of thousands of Jews, forgiving the death of those 23 children, is a travesty? And they thought that this will be great. Okay. Put the theological on the side. I said I want to examine this from a logical perspective. Okay, let's go back to that robber. When that robber robbed the money, what happened? He had $100 in his hand. He said, I don't believe in God. I don't believe in morality. I got this $100. Well, that's what he thought, right? So I want to ask a question. Let's think about this logically. Arafat killed thousands of Jews. He was in Jordan. He fomented a revolution there. They kicked him out. He was in Lebanon. He fomented, I don't know about that. They kicked him out. Wherever he went, fomented problems. Who actually thinks that taking a terrorist that has a record of murdering Jews, giving him guns, giving him money, who actually thought logically, not put theology on the side, put godless people on the side, just logically, this is going to bring peace? The disengagement from Gaza. Who logically thought that leaving Gaza in the hands of Hamas, and that very day they were burning down the Jewish synagogues and burning down the Jewish houses and burning down the greenhouses that Israel gave them all this agricultural technology. Everything was burnt down that very day. And they started shooting rockets into Israel. Who logically thought that this is going to be good? Well, the answer is a lot of people. A lot of people thought this is, yeah, well, of course. Don't you dare speak against it. We'll cancel you if you speak against it. So I'm going back to this verse in Isaiah, which says, wake up. And when you wake, I want you to know, first it says, think, stop and think. And when you stop and think, you'll be shocked. And I'm shocked. And I was against Oslo and I was against the disengagement, but I'm shocked because I'm thinking about it. What's going on? What happened? And the verse ends, and I want to read to you the end of the verse. Shacheru velo yain. There are people, this is literally the continuation of that same verse. There are people who are drunk, even though they did not drink any wine. Na'u velo shechal. There are people who sway and act in an irrational fashion, like as if although they're inebriated with alcohol, but they didn't drink any alcohol, right? So there was a madness that took over the Jewish people, including our religious leadership, not all of it. But I want to share with you a story, just to show you how dramatic it was. This is before the disengagement in Gaza. A well-known religious figure, a political religious figure, and it wasn't from Shas. This time it was from the national religious, a more moderate, non-Haredim. He was invited to my synagogue. I used to pray in a Moroccan synagogue, and he stood up there because there was some opposition to the disengagement. There were some people like me who thought, oh, it might be bad to give Hamas Gaza, right? Like, you're right, brilliant on my part to figure that out. Anyway, so this rabbi is there, and he's actually preaching to the synagogue. How dare we go against the government? The government of Israel, everyone has to accept the rule of law, and the government establishes the law, and we have no right to speak out. I'm listening to this, and I'm like, I mean, what are you talking about? Isn't that exactly what the Nazis said? We were just following orders. So the rabbi is going on how every soldier has to follow the orders he is given by his commanders to evacuate Jews from their houses, even if they don't want to get out. And that's what happened. And that's what happened, right? They literally went out and they took Jews out of their houses. They kicked Jews out of their houses. And if a soldier refused to do it, he was terrified. I feel bad for these soldiers, by the way. I don't blame the soldiers. God forbid. My son, by the way, is a combat soldier. I don't know what he would have done and what I would have done if they told him go and kick that Jew out of his house. It would have been a horrible feeling. I would have told him to go to jail, but it's not so easy to tell somebody to lose their army career and to really, I mean, it's devastating to one's life, right? So, I'm like, I speak, oh yeah, I would have told him to go to jail, but it's not such a simple thing. But the fact is, I don't blame the soldiers. I blame the leadership. And a lot of the religious leadership supported this horrible, immoral travesty, which had no logical support. So it had no support at the theological level. It had no support at the logical level. So what are you doing? And we come to October 7th. Who would have thought that this would have happened? So at this point, I realized it's time to speak up and to say the truth. All I can do is I can say the truth. I can provide information. People will reach whatever conclusion they want to reach. I was shocked thinking this whole thing. And I hope that some of the people hearing this are shocked when they find out what actually happened, what led to October 7th. There was complete failure of leadership, secular, religious, and there was, of course, many people who were good. God forbid. I have to say this. Maybe I can just take a step back. God forbid that I should indict everyone. No, there were many people who were against us. There were many people who were against the disengagement, but the majority would shut up the minority and tell them you have no right to speak. And that's really devastating.
So I want to just piggyback on something you just said before. First of all, the mistakes of the nation as a whole. The Churban, according to the Rambam, occurred, the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash occurred because people were involved in magical thinking and astrology and all these nonsensical things instead of actually being prepared like a normal civilization would be. The other part is that I think people would have an issue with is saying that how can our leaders, especially rabbinic leaders, make these kinds of mistakes? But we see a precedent for that even in the Torah with Kohen Gadol bringing the Korban Chatat for the mistakes of leadership, right? Leaders can make mistakes. And I think that's also, an important point to make, that not only can our nation make mistakes, but also our leaders can make mistakes, even the rabbis.
Well, 100%. Now, Moshe Rabbeinu was not politically involved. He wasn't a politician. He was truly a man of God. And yet, he did make a mistake, right? When he sent the Meraglim, he made a mistake. It was a political mistake. It wasn't a moral mistake. I don't compare his mistake to the rabbis who supported Oslo or to the rabbis who supported the disengagement. Of course not. That was just evil stupidity. Okay, so I'm not going to be gentle about this. That was actual evil stupidity. As Jews are getting murdered, because before the disengagement in 2005, the Jews were getting murdered on a daily basis by these Hamas terrorists to whom they gave the Gaza Strip. I mean, it's just remarkable evil. But okay, but to your point, you are correct. In Jewish thinking, there is no such thing as a saint. You want a saint? Christians have saints. We don't have saints. We have Hachamim. The Hachamim are fallible. They can make a mistake. God can get angry at them for their mistake. And the greatest man that ever lived and ever shall live, Moshe Rabbeinu, he did make a mistake in sending the Meraglim. He shouldn't have done it. It was a political mistake. And he paid dearly for that mistake, because that's why ultimately that was the beginning of the end for him, right? So, in terms of not entering the land of Israel.
Yeah. So one of the parts that I wanted you to maybe expand on a little bit is I'm curious to know what you think about this. We at this moment in time, we're kind of desperate for leadership. There isn't that voice that is kind of like leading us through this period to tell us like about ideas and perspectives and how do we go about the future of Judaism. I'm finding that the rabbis aren't really stepping up. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm finding that it's more the influencers on social media who are really like the everyday people, and we have unfortunately clownish kind of rabbis going on social media and going on these shows on the news and debating people and calling themselves America's rabbi and all these kinds of things. Why do you think it is today that we're lacking this kind of these religious voices that can lead us? I'm sure that they exist. You're one of them, but they're kind of not so in the forefront. People are turning to the everyday people for leadership.
Yeah. Look, authentic Torah Judaism is very different from Western world thinking. The Western world's thought processes is based upon Greek civilization and Greek metaphysics. Judaism proposes a completely different process, a completely different approach to understanding the world. And these two approaches, one side the Western world, the other side Torah, and I'll give you an example of some of the differences. Hey, I'm an American. I was raised in America. I was born in America. I watch American TV shows. I watch American movies. What do you think is going to be more attractive to me as a person? A rabbi who represents Greek metaphysics or a rabbi who represents authentic Torah Judaism? What do you think is going to talk to me more as a person?
The Greek.
Okay. Well, right. So I'll give you an example. In Judaism, in Greek civilization, there's an emphasis on the visual, right? So if you read the stories, if you read the poetry, if you read the mythology, they always describe things in great visual detail, right? Now, Greek philosophy, Platonic metaphysics is based on the shapes of things, and there's a perfect shape, and the visual represents the truth and the absolute truth. Okay, so this is in Greek thinking. Now, let's look at Torah thinking. What did Abraham Avinu look like?
Don't know.
What about Yitzhak? What about Yaakov? What about Moshe? Did Moshe Rabbeinu look like Charlton Heston? Or maybe he looked like Woody Allen, God forbid. What did he look like? I don't know. The Torah never tells us. Sarai Imenu, we know she was beautiful. Doesn't tell us how she was beautiful. We just know she was beautiful because we need to understand the story, why it is that Paro and then Avimelech kidnapped her, right? But other than that, we would not have known anything about Sarah, right? So the Torah has zero visual details unless it's pertinent to the story and to understanding the story. So what is important to Jewish thinking? So we're more interested in words, in the words that are spoken. Is there truth in these words, right? Or words that are written, text. We're very interested in text, right? So we have different types of text. We have Torah Sheba'al Peh, Torah Shebiktav, and Torah Sheba'al Peh. We have different categories. Torah Shebiktav, we have different categories. But this whole idea is completely foreign to the Western mind, right? So now I am a simple Jew raised in America. The rabbi walks in with a beard, very handsome and tall. And then he starts speaking about the Kabbalah. And listen, I'm an empty, vacuous person. He's talking to me about mysticism, right? And it's very exciting. It's very intriguing. I mean, it has nothing to do with authentic Jewish Kabbalah, obviously, right? Because an authentic Jewish Kabbalah cannot be taught to a person who is ignorant of Judaism. But it doesn't matter because it's a type of magic and it's kind of exciting, right? So the challenge is, are people willing to give up their Western thought patterns in favor of Jewish thought patterns? And if they're not willing to do that, there will be consequences.
Well said.
Yeah.
Do you have anything to add, or?
I think that was just well said. Nothing to add there. Very well said. Okay, so let's did you Did you finish to say everything you wanted to say regarding our first question?
I mean, I think the first question was, why did I decide to speak out? And, what was it? So I think that verse in Isaiah really, the verse in Isaiah actually spoke to me.
Really
and it really was where I just said, this was shocking. I'm shocked. This idea, there was a rabbi in the 80s who was very friendly with me and my father in Jerusalem. And when I was young, I said, come on, like, what are you saying? But I was young, whatever. And he used to say, this was back in the 80s, I don't know that the state of Israel will exist forever, meaning that this return of the Jews to the land of Israel will be permanent. And in my mind, I said, well, this guy is he was, I was young. I had that idea. Nothing bad can happen to the Jews. We all say never again, right? That whole idea. Right. And I was wrong. I don't know that that's the case. I think we can really mess things up. Do I believe that this is the return of the Jews to Israel? Yes. Do I believe that this is the end of God? Yes. Do I believe that this will eventually lead to the Messianic era? Yes. What will happen between then and now? How many people will be killed? How many people will be raped? How many people will be whatever? And that's where I'm concerned.
Your point regarding this obsession with visuals. It's even in the Sfarim. Like you go to a bookstore, like the Sfarim, it's more like they make sure to give like beautiful covers and beautiful especially when you have like the books that talk about like Rabbeim, and some of them are good, but like even the one with Marano Avadia, what a cover it, and it's almost like, and I'm guilty of this growing up. I'm guilty of this, so that's why it came to my mind. There's almost like this feeling, like the beauty that they put into the book. When you start to read it, you think everything there is going to be true. In a weird way, I don't know how to explain to you what I mean. It's almost like it's doing something. You know what I mean? But we've lost connection to content and critical thinking, and to be able to really understand wisdom without the cover. You know what I mean? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let me just address that. And I don't mean to suggest that there's nothing. The visual has to do with the imaginative faculty. Art. There's some beautiful artworks. I don't mean to come off as saying that it's valueless.
Right.
Because we know, for example, the Kohen Gadol had beautiful clothing, and we say, Lechavod Tifaret. So it's not valueless, right? But the point is, a Jewish person is less interested in what he looks like, and he's more interested in the words that come out of his mouth and the intelligence of the person. Now, let's look at the Kohen Gadol. The Kohen Gadol can be an unbelievably beautiful person in his midot, in his character traits, in his behavior. He can be a leader who really inspires people. And part of that is the way he looks. Right. Fair enough. But you can have a Kohen Gadol who looks beautiful, who wears the same clothing, who's very handsome, and he answers the Kodesh HaKodashim as he did in the days of Bayit Sheni, where practically every year they had to change the Kohen Gadol. There was Yohanan Kohen Gadol, he was 80 years. There was Shimon HaTzadik was 40 years. There was Yishmael ben Gudgadai, he was, I think, 12 years. There were a few Kohanim Gadolim that lasted for a long time. But the majority of the Kohanim Gadolim, they died that year. So they were beautiful, but they entered the Kodesh HaKodashim, and they were not worthy to enter the Kodesh HaKodashim. And they died. So I'm not rejecting beauty. I'm rejecting beauty as the criteria through which to judge.
Right.
And that's where Judaism is unique. You can go to the art museum if you need to and enjoy it. Nothing wrong with it. But understand, that's dimayon, that's imagination. That is not the way to judge the reality of the situation.
Very good. Okay. So one of the most contentious issues between the Haredi community and the state of Israel has been military service. While some Haredim volunteered for the army after the attacks, the majority did not. And many Haredi leaders continue to oppose any involvement with the IDF or the state, even during wartime, yet continue to benefit from its resources. Some leaders, like the chief rabbi Rav Yitzchak Yosef, have suggested that if Haredim were drafted, they should all leave the country. What is your response to Haredi leaders who reject any connection with the army or any type of national service? How do you respond to the use of arguments such as Shevet Levi did not go out to war, or our Torah study protects us, to justify their stance?
And before you get into your answer, maybe you can give us kind of a broad understanding of what the Haredi situation in Israel, with the extreme poverty rates, the lack of, education, the tax burden they pose in society, just to give people a perspective.
This whole.
Yeah. Okay, so first let me give you just kind of the background, and then we can kind of get into the other issues. So the background is that, let's say you have a Haredi living in Bnei Brak. The general lifestyle is where he has to go to a Kollel. As a Kollel person, he will get a particular monthly stipend. It's not gonna be enough to live on, whatever the stipend is. I don't know what it is, but I'm just throwing a number. Let's say it's 2,000 shekels or 3,000. I don't know. Let's say about $1,000 a month. So he's not gonna make the month. It's not gonna work for him. His wife is gonna be working full time probably. Maybe he'll do a nighttime Kollel. Maybe he'll do a Kollel in the daytime and a nighttime Kollel. He might work a job on the side, but he wouldn't want people to know that he's working, because working is considered like it's considered an embarrassment. You can't let people know you're working. That's like, right? Because working is bad. Only studying Torah is good. Working is bad. So he might work at night on another job, or he might go to a second Kollel if he gets accepted to a second Kollel. And it's going to be a very difficult lifestyle, one of poverty. Right. The kids probably will go to one of the religious schools in the area. The education is not the best, at least not in terms of mathematics and, just basic fundamental knowledge. In the Sephardic world, we've always emphasized how a complete person has to have chokhmah, has to have know things, has to know mathematics, has to know astronomy, has to know physics, has to know chemistry, biology, etc., has to know, understand the world. But they don't have that. But here's the thing, and this is the way it works. So, and when somebody came to me and told me this, that's how I know this. I lived in Israel. Honestly, it wasn't the easiest place in the world to live. There's an old joke that if you want to have $1 million in Israel, you should come with $10 million, and then little by little, whittle it down to $1 million. Okay, so I lived there. So when somebody came to me and he says, listen, he was a rabbi, says, listen, you're very, you're a good speaker. Why don't you start a Kollel? This is okay. Like, I was curious. He intrigued me. Says, listen, the way it works is as follows. Your students are going to get a monthly stipend from the government. But the way it works is the Rosh Yeshiva gets to keep a high percentage of that monthly stipend. So let's say the stipend, again, I'm probably off on the numbers, but let's say the stipend is like 4,000 shekels. So you'll take 1,500 per student, leaving in with 2,500. They'll live in poverty, but you will have a great lifestyle because they've got like 20 students, and now it's like 30,000 shekels a month, and each one of them is getting 2,500 shekels a month. So it's true they live in poverty, but you can make good money this way. I chose not to do this. Okay, I made that personal choice. Wow. I feel like I have to take a shower just talking about that. Honestly,
I didn't know this. I had to see that's how it goes.
Right.
Wow.
So there is that. And it's a problem. It's a problem. Okay, so I think and of course, doing the army is very bad. You can't do the army. The reason, in my opinion, they don't want anybody doing the army is because once you do the army, you get out into the real world. There's job opportunities. You may decide, hey, I can get a job, I can work. Once you work and get a job, you don't necessarily need to vote for Shas or Degel Torah because you don't need them to support you, because now you're kind of like working, so you don't need the monthly stipend that you would get, right, when they're in power, right? So there's something happening here that I would consider to be
nature.
Well, yeah, okay. We can use different adjectives to describe it. But I think
how do they get around the halakha, according to the Rambam, where a person cannot just rely on this kind of charity for learning Torah for they might come to, let's say, steal, right? That's the whole idea, the warning about that. And not only that, we have the famous Agadah of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai in the cave.
There's many
There's many Agadot, but that particularly stands out because he comes out of it and he's punished because he doesn't understand that the world is not just about learning; it's about doing. So how do they get around these? Like, what is the justification? Just so we understand the mindset.
All right. So how do I put this? Okay, let me say this. From the perspective of Jewish law, of halakha, there is no justification. Okay. I'll take it even further. From the perspective of Jewish law, for a person to say, I don't want to work, is not a good thing. It's an avon, right? The Gemara states explicitly in Masechet Berachot Daf Het, for those who want to check it up, it brings a pasuk, Yeriya kapecha ki tochel, ashrecha v'tov lach. The pasuk says, a person, this is a pasuk in Tehillim, which says that if a person works hard and he eats the food that is the fruit of his own labor, ashrecha, you're a fortunate person, v'tov lach, and this is really good for you. This is the pasuk in Tehillim. On that pasuk in Tehillim, the Gemara in Masechet Berachot says, ashrecha ba'olam hazeh. This is great. You're fortunate that in this world, you can enjoy eating the food that you worked for. V'tov lach le'olam haba. But the real reward for working is in the world to come. So the Gemara says, Gadol ha'nehene miyariya kapav miyarei shamayim, right? That a person who works hard is actually a higher madrega than a person who has yirat shamayim. It's a hyperbola, but the point is very clear that from the perspective of Judaism, of Torah Judaism, right? Of course, it's a mitzvah to work and to support yourself and not to live off charity, right? Of course. I mean, this is explicit, right? In Bnei Brak today, if you want your daughter to get married, so you're going to go to a shatchanit, right? A marriage, I don't know how you say it in English, right? A matchmaker, right? Matchmaker, make me a match, right? So shatchanit. Okay, so you go to the shatchanit. Now you got to put the resume. Now the matchmaker is going to give you somebody. He studies in the Kollel half a day and he works half a day. Oh my gosh, what type of person are you giving my daughter? A person who works? Meaning you would try to hide that fact. If you were the father of the potential groom, you wouldn't put it on the resume that he works. That's considered like an embarrassment. Right? So from a societal perspective, this is complete lunacy. Right? You understand that, right? I mean, of course, it's lunacy. But from a Torah perspective, it's an averah. Now, what makes it it's a double averah. Okay, let me explain to you why it's a double averah. The averah is you don't want to work when the Torah says you should work, right? But it's a double averah because look, there are people who live in moral rot. It happens. What are you going to do? Humanity ain't perfect. I get it. People make mistakes. They don't want to work. I don't know. They want to do jobs that are bad jobs. Dishonesty. There's a lot of moral rot in the world. I have one thing I want to say about moral rot and people who live in moral rot. If you're going to do it, don't impute your moral rot on the Torah. That is the biggest avon possible. You are desecrating the Torah. When you say, yeah, I live in moral rot, I'm a parasite, but it's okay. This is what the Torah wants me to do. You have just done a double avon. Because had you just said, I don't want to work, okay, I get it. Listen, I know there are people who, for some reason, some people have psychological issues, they can't work. It's okay. I'm actually sympathetic to people's weaknesses. I'm kind of liberal in that way. I'm not liberal when it comes to desecrating the Torah. I'm not liberal when it comes to desecrating God's name. And that's what these people are doing. They are causing in Israel a terrible rift in society where people see those individuals and they say, oh, look at the Torah. According to the Torah, they can live like that. And they end up hating the Torah.
Yep.
That's a real problem. There's a lot of hatred in Israel today. By the way, I was there as a religious person, and my son goes to the army and he works and I worked, but they saw me with a kippah, and you can tell when they dislike you. This is a very big problem. Now, with your permission, I want to bring to your attention, they always bring up this thing, Torato umanuto. Oh, this is Shiva boy, Torato umanuto. Torato umanuto means his Torah is his work. And they always say, oh, Torato umanuto. Don't you hear that all the time? Oh, the Bachorei Yeshiva Torato umanuto. The level of ignorance among the religious authorities in Israel, the rabbis, is simply staggering. Okay, let me tell you what Torato umanuto actually means. This is from the Gemara. It is explicit in the Gemara. It's in Masechet Shabbat, Daf Yod Aleph, Amud Aleph. I actually printed out the Gemara. With your permission, I want to read it.
Yes.
Hold on one second. Torato umanuto. There's a Mishnah in Masechet Shabbat that deals with the question is, do you have to stop what you're doing if it's a time for Tefilat Mincha? And let's say maybe you're taking a haircut, maybe you're doing something that you're not supposed to do before Mincha, you're having a meal, and then the Gemara says, well, you shouldn't start doing that before Mincha. But if you started doing it, okay, continue the meal, continue the haircut. Okay. And then the Mishnah says, mafsikin kriyat shema, but you do stop for kriyat shema. Right. The Gemara says, Tanya, I'm reading it now. Haredim shayu osekin b'Torah. Talmidei Chachamim were sitting down studying Torah. Mafsikin likriyat shema. If it's time for kriyat shema, they have to stop. They have to stop studying Torah, and they have to say kriyat shema. Meaning kriyat shema is more important than Talmud Torah. Okay, simple. Ve'en mafsikin latefillah. But if they're studying Torah and it's time to pray, they don't have to stop for tefillah. They can continue studying Torah even though it's time to pray. Why? Because the Talmud Torah is the oraita, and the times of the prayer are the Rabbanan, so you can pray later. Right? Now here's the magic word. You remember Torato umanuto or Toratanu umanutan? You hear that every single time there's a dialogue about whether they should or shouldn't serve in the army. Oh, Torato umanuto. Okay. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. So Rabbi Yochanan, he examines this beraita. He says, Lo shanu. When do we say that if a person is studying Torah or Talmidei Chachamim are studying Torah, that they don't have to stop if it's time to pray? They have to stop for Kriyat Shema. They don't have to stop for prayer. Keron Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai v'chaverav shetoratan umanutan. Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai and the people who follow Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, who they study Torah all day. These are the greatest Tanaim in Jewish history, right? When they study Torah, he's in the Me'ara with his son studying Torah. There's fire around them. And we say, you don't have to stop for tefillah because there's fire of Torah around you. So don't stop, continue. It's beautiful. Aval Keron Anu, Rabbi Yochanan, who was one of the greatest Emoraim ever. No, we didn't reach that level. We didn't reach that level. Rabbi Yochanan. It's a joke. It's a joke. I'm sorry. It's a joke. I'm nothing against the yeshiva bachas. Beautiful. They have a thing where recently all of them went to a soccer game and they brought it in a derogatory fashion. I want them to go see soccer. It's okay. They should see soccer games. But please, Toratan umanutan, are you joking? All of the Hachamim of the Gemara say, no, we're not at that level. That was the Tanaim, and not all the Tanaim. Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai. Okay. Yeah. All right. So whatever comes out of this podcast, can people stop using the term Torato umanuto? Please, I'm begging you. It doesn't make any sense. Yeah. That's all. We can stop the podcast or we can continue. It's up to you.
my issue is like I think maybe 100 years ago they were expecting okay, a Rav Ovadia type of person, that guy maybe should be studying all day, the once in a generation kind of mind. But an entire society that is built off of this mentality, it's bound to go haywire. And it's almost like they'll also use this Yisachar Zevulun thing, but the thing is the taxpayers are supporting. You have a gun to their head. They don't have a choice in the matter. This is not the same comparison. So I think that this is a very, very deep problem, but I wanted to get into Rav Yitzhak Yosef's comments before we get to the next segment, because that was
But hold on, can I interject for 1 second?
Sure.
About what you just said? Rabbi Yosef Kather.
I'm still processing what you said before. It's incredible, but okay, yeah, go on.
Okay, Rabbi Yosef Kather, to your point about Harav Ovadia Yosef, I agree. There are geniuses, and we should have a community scholarship. I really believe that. The same way we have scholarships for universities, and people go to university, and we give them a scholarship. I 100% believe we should have scholarships for students to study Torah. But that's to study Torah and then go out to the world and do whatever it is you want to do. You want to become a teacher, you want to become a mohel, you want to become a sofer, you want to contribute however it is you want to contribute. No problem. I'm not against scholarships. I support scholarship. I personally, Beli Neder, would love to give money to a good scholarship to have Talmidei Chachamim studying Torah. It would be my pleasure to do that. I think Rambam also did that. I'm not against that. I'm against the idea that you're not going to work. And instead of working, all you're going to do is study Torah, and that's it. Now, if you want motto, go for it. Go for it. Do it. Love it. Right. That's one thing. Right now, Rabbi Yosef Kather, he was in Merkaz Arab. He came from Yemen. He wanted to study. They said, no problem, we'll take care of you. But he didn't like it, but he had to take the money. He paid back every single penny. Wow. He worked after he finished, and he paid back. I believe he was a silversmith. I believe he made things with metal. Okay. He worked and he paid back every penny. Now, nobody tell me that because Rabbi Yosef Kather worked, that somehow he didn't reach the level of some of these yeshiva bachors in Bnei Brak. Please, don't say that. I mean, this Rabbi Yosef Kather was, okay. He paid back every penny. That was to your point. Now, I know you had another question. I'm willing to hear the question.
There's these two problematic statements, which I don't think are accurate, but it's the idea of, first of all, telling everyone they should leave the country if we're drafted. That's number one. Number two is Shevet Levi did not go to war, using that as the justification, which is also not true. And our Torah protects all, right? Torah itself is a protection.
Right. Let me deal first with the statement of the chief rabbi. I just remember chief rabbis, they were unifying figures who exuded leadership and love, and when they spoke, there was a certain wisdom in their words, and the wisdom was appreciated by everyone. There were people who were less religious, maybe they didn't care so much for it, but there was nothing you can, it was a unifying moment when you would hear the chief rabbi speaking. Certainly when Harav Uziel, he would get on the radio and he would speak. It was a beautiful moment in the bus or in the taxi or in the house where the radio was on, and they would be listening to his words. I miss those days. I really do. There's a certain callousness when a chief rabbi, let's say you believe that the yeshiva students are at a higher level than the soldiers who are getting killed, right? Let's say you believe that. You don't have to say that, because there's parents who actually lost their children. So when you, as a chief rabbi, say, yeah, hem lo zachu, these people, they don't have the merits that we have, right? So the parents of the soldiers who died in the battle, or the parents of the soldiers who are in the Gaza Strip, and they're afraid for their children, and the rabbi is saying, they don't have the real merit. You know what the merit is? The yeshiva bachars in Bnei Brak, in Ponovich, in Jerusalem. It's a bit callous, isn't it? For lack of a better word, I really miss the days when chief rabbis would would open their mouths and they would be, you would feel inspired, you would feel love, you would feel a sense of, yeah, we're all part of Am Yisrael. We're going to leave the country if they force us to be in the army. Why does anybody need to force you to be in the army? It's a mitzvah. It's a halakha pesukah. There's no mahloket. Some things is mahloket, right? There's a lot of things that is mahloket in Judaism. This isn't one of them. If there's a milchemet mitzvah, which is defined by Jewish law as a milchama for the survival of the country where they want to kill Jews, and you need to like defend yourself from the people who want to kill you, let's call the milchemet mitzvah, one of the ideas of milchemet mitzvah. According to halakha, everybody has to go to the milchemet mitzvah. So what does it mean? If they force us to serve, but you're the chief rabbi, you know what the halakha is. Why should anybody have to force you to serve? That you're threatening, if they force us to serve, we're going to leave the country. Oh, I don't know. I want to show you this book. This book was written by Harav Shlomo Goren. It is it's a beautiful book. It's his autobiography. I really like the book. It introduced me to the Ashkenazi Talmudic Chachamim, and it was good for me. It was good for me to read about him. So he describes his life coming to Israel and how they were saved from the Holocaust. He describes the War of Independence in Israel, and he describes how the Haredim in Meir and the other yeshivot, they all joined the war. What happened to our yeshiva bachars and we can't fight in the war? What happened? No. Read the book. It's all in here. Where he talks about the 1948 War of Independence in Israel. He describes how all the Haredim went and they joined the army. Of course. Why should that even be surprising? The fact that we think it's surprising means that there's something crazy happening in Am Yisrael. No, they're coming to kill you, but you should be in the yeshiva studying Torah. Where did we ever see that? Moshe Rabbeinu, I think he was kind of at the age of 120, he was a Torah scholar. Some would make that argument, right? He went to war personally. He personally went to war. Yoshua bin Nun, he wasn't. Maybe he didn't reach a level of Ponovich. I get it, but we could say he was a yeshiva bachar, right? He went to war. Well, where does it say in the Torah? Who was exempt from the army? Where does it say that? Now, this thing that they love quoting about Shevet Levi. Okay. Let's put the law of Shevet Levi on the side. I'll explain that law in a moment. Are they Leviim? So you say, because I'm studying Torah, I'm Shevet Levi. Okay, so let me ask you a question, Mrs. Shevet Levi, since you're Shevet Levi. Okay, good. You're going to get married now. You're going to have a firstborn. You're actually Yisrael. Before you started studying Torah, you're Yisrael. Now you're Levi. Are you going to do pidyon on your ben? A Levi doesn't have to do pidyon becholot on the ben, does he? On his son. Are you going to do it? Well, you're Shevet Levi. You don't have to do pidyon becholot, I guess, right? But when the Mashiach comes, they're going to give you Ma'aser Yishom because you're studying Torah. This is complete lunacy. No intelligent Torah scholar will make that argument. It is a ludicrous, it is not a serious argument. It's just not serious. Now, there is a law that when there's a milchemet mitzvah, everybody has to go to the milchemet mitzvah. Harambam says, and let me see if I can find the halakha. In Harambam, it's at the end of, give me a moment, it's at the end of Hilchot Shemitah. The very, very last paragraph. Hold on one second. Give me a moment. I'm just opening up Harambam. I'm opening up the Mishneh Torah, Sefer Zeraim. Okay, here it is. Mishneh Torah, Sefer Zeraim. I'm sorry for the delay.
No worries. Take your time.
Here it is. Okay, I want to read it to you so you hear what he says. He says, and it really is important when you read halakha, when you read Torah, to be medayek. I said earlier that we're a people of words and text, right? So you have to be sensitive to what the halakha says here. It does speak about Shevet Levi, and it says that when Shevet Levi is in the war, they go to the war, but it says that Shevet Levi doesn't have a right to the war booty. They're excluded from that. It says Shevet Levi is not going to get a nahala, a piece of land in Israel, because they get the Arei Halviim. So We don't give that to them. And then he explains why. And then it says, Lo orechin milchama kishar Yisrael. Lo orechin. The word is orechin milchama kishar Yisrael. So what does it mean, orechin milchama? What does that word mean? It doesn't say lo yosein la milchama. It can say that because throughout Jewish history, Levim did go out to the war. Pinchas ben Elazar ben Aaron Kohen. He went to the war in Midyan, right? And over again, we saw over and over again Levim mentioned in the Tanakh who were out in the war. So what does that mean, la'orechim? La'aroch means to prepare something. So let me explain to you. So, for example, in the book of Shemuel, during that first battle between the Israelites and the Philistines, they were on their respective hills. The Jewish people were in Eben Ha'ezer, and the Philistines were in Afeka. So that's where the Mahane was. That's where the military base was. Now, once you see the military base, you begin to plan how you're going to be doing the battle. So it's kind of like when you're in football, you see the formation of the other side. So you huddle together and you say, you're going to go here, you're going to do this. You're making the plan for the next move. Lo orechin milchama. The Levim are not involved in the tactical aspects of the warfare, right? Why? I think it makes sense. I'm a rabbi. I think about Torah. I have a certain logical thought pattern, I hope, right? And sometimes for war, that type of thought pattern doesn't work. You need to have people who are more shrewd, more cunning. Oh, wait, go there. They're going to chase you there, and then we're going to come from the other side, whatever it is. So it doesn't say lo yosein, lo orechin milchama. Okay, but again, the whole discussion is obviated by the fact that in reality they are not Levim, and in reality Levim do have to go to Milchemet Nisah just like everybody else, and the laws of Leviyah do not apply of the Levi don't apply today in Israel, right? I mean that's the truth. When the Mashiach comes, he'll have to decide what to do with the Levim and how to deploy us. But yeah, okay.
So actually, Rabbi Sachs had a quote. I'm not going to remember it, but there was something along the lines of the fact that today one of the biggest problems in Judaism is that the posek halacha and the community rabbi are completely like there's a complete divide between them, because how do you give psak if you're not aware of the actual problems that are happening in the community, right? So I feel like there's a lot of that. That's what changed from the time of Rav Goren. I think that the disconnect has deepened for some reason. I don't know why that is. I'm wondering if you have any ideas of why that happened.
I think people are just in Israel or in America. In Israel, I can talk about Israel. I think people are just upset. I mean, it's hard to make a look. Okay. Why is Israel allowing Hezbollah to bomb them now since October 8th? Why? Now, if you drew a new map of Israel today, let's be honest, the map would be truncated. You wouldn't have the north of Israel. Israel does not have a monopoly of violence, which is how Thomas Hobbes and Leviathan defines sovereignty, and that definition of sovereignty is applicable today. Israel does not have a monopoly of violence over the northern part of Israel. In fact, most of the people who used to live in the northern part of Israel, they're refugees somewhere in the middle of the country, living in small hotel rooms. So we lost the north of Israel. So I'd like to ask a question. Why do you think that is? Well, we don't have enough soldiers. There's so much that the soldiers can do, right? They've been in Gaza now for close to a year. God bless all of them. My son was in Gaza for I don't know how many months. There's so much these boys can do, right? Hashem Yishmerem min serem. Now, the Haredi community, theoretically, and I could be off by the numbers here, so I apologize, they can be contributing between 12 to 15,000 soldiers a year. There could have been an extra 100,000 soldiers easily from the Haredi community. So they're taking away some of the tax money so they can study in the Kollel. They refuse to serve in the army. They look down upon the people who do pay their salaries and do send their children to the army. I mean, geez, I'm like a little concerned that there's civil strife in Israel, but I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised.
They will be the
Right?
majority. They will be the majority in 2060, I think, or something like. I think I read a study.
So you tell me, what's going to happen? What's going to happen to the state of Israel? You're right. They're going to be the majority soon. And they say so. And they gloat about it. I mean, it's kind of funny. It's really funny, like in a very tragic sense, because do you understand what you're saying? Who's going to be protecting you? Who's going to be paying your salaries? There's going to be no one left. And by the way, I speak to people in Israel. I hate saying this, but there's people who are trying to leave and or leaving because they realize like this can't go on. It can't. So again, God can protect us from our enemies. He can't protect us from our stupidity.
Well said. Well said. And how would you, obviously, I think you touched on it, but just the other part, which was that Torah study can protect us. That where is this idea coming from, and how would you educate them about this?
Okay, so first let's say one thing, and then I'll say another thing. There was no place you're going to see in the Gemara that there was a battle and some rabbis sat down and started saying Tehillim. Okay. The rabbis,
David Melech himself, when his child was sick, he didn't say Tehillim, right? So these are new phenomena.
Right. Okay. So now, and the rabbis, they all went to war against the Romans in the days of Antiochus. Okay. Now, there is a municipal rule which has to do with municipal taxation, which favors the Talmidei Chachamim. There are certain things in Jewish law where we give certain favoritism to Talmidei Chachamim by virtue of the fact that they study Torah. One of these municipal rules is that when you have a tax levy on a city, so you have different types of taxes, whatever for infrastructure. But one of the taxes they used to have was for protection of the city, because they would have like night watchmen would go around the city and protect. So one of the special tax benefits of a Talmid Chacham for municipal law purposes was that he wouldn't have to pay those taxes to protect the city. That is correct, right? That is true. That doesn't contradict the law that when there was a milchemet misvah against an external enemy, that every single person must go to a milchemet misvah. Just to show you how dramatic the law is, Rambam writes, and this is based on the Gemara, he's not making it up, afilu hatan mechupato, even a young groom and a bride who just got married, if need be, to defend the land of Israel, we send them to the battle to defend us against the enemies of the Jews. But again, this shows a certain type of sloppy thinking, right? Meaning, let's say you go to a tax lawyer, and the tax lawyer says, you have a certain exemption, right? You're exempt from tax because I know you're a teacher, and as a teacher, you get certain benefits. Say, so if I'm exempt from tax as a teacher from that, I also don't have to, I don't have to pay when I go. There's no, there is an exemption. Correct. Take it. It's lovely. Say thank you. Nobody's giving you more than the exemption. So this whole idea that because there's an exemption from municipal taxes, I'm exempt from milchemet misvah. But it doesn't say that. There is no exemption from milchemet misvah. So again, it's a type of sloppy thinking. It's not serious. No serious Talmid Chacham is going to speak like this and actually try to convince other serious people of the veracity of what he is saying.
I was going to go to the third question, but I'm thinking, based on what you just said, I think we should do the fourth question first. Yeah. And I'll tell you why. Because I think that part of what the Haredi leaders or the Haredi world might respond to you here is that what you're saying is correct so long as they would have actually recognized Israel as Eretz Israel, meaning as long as Israel is run by a secular government, they openly are anti-Zionistical, and they don't recognize it as Eretz Israel within the function of halacha where there were to be a legitimized Eretz Israel, but rather they see it as a secular government has come in and has
Doesn't have
defiled the land, and that in reality the land we shouldn't even be in the land in this current state. So I think that what they would say to you when they're looking at this is, all you're saying is correct, Chacham Avraham. Everything you're saying is correct, except that you are basing all this off of the context that we have a fully fledged, legitimized Eretz Israel with all its halachic ramifications and everything, because it is you get what I'm trying to say. And so we wanted to ask you to get into the idea of Zionism, anti-Zionism, what's going on here. And I also wonder if you can tie in the previous points into here. Can they say that because they don't accept Eretz Israel as being Eretz Israel the way it would be relative towards all the halachot that you're bringing out, and they think that we should actually, the government should not be there, and that they even should hope that, Israel should be abandoned in a way, yet they live there. I know that's the contradiction, but I'm just saying this is how they're going about it. What would you say about that?
They don't see I'm not speaking for all of them, but I'm sure many of them, the anti-Zionist Haredim, they don't see the stamp of approval from Hashem. They don't see this as a fulfillment of prophecy.
I made a long-winded, convoluted way of saying it, but the point, I hope, was clear. Okay.
I'm not happy with the state of affairs in Israel, personally. I don't like the fact that it's a secular government. I don't like the fact that they're not going to allow prayer in Tel Aviv this year outside in the public. I don't like a lot of things that are happening there. So I'm sympathetic to the concerns about that reality. But again, God can forgive us for making an avon if we make teshuvah. One thing my father writes about is political teshuvah. Political teshuvah means if we act in a stupid way and we suffer as a result as a nation, it's time to reconsider what we did and make teshuvah as to the mistakes we made. I'm going to bring you this book again. Thank you for asking the question. So Rav Shlomo Goren says, and I'm probably off here on, like the numbers, but he was, apparently his parents, they wanted to move to Israel. This is before the Holocaust. So his father goes to the Rebbe. They were into that particular idea. He asked him for permission to move to Israel. The Rebbe says, why do you want to move to Israel? There was a lot of antagonism, knowing that many of the people who lived in Israel were irreligious, right? So why do you want to move there? So basically he said no. Okay. He was a little upset. He wanted to move to Israel. So he came up with an idea. The mom of Rav Goren said, you know what? Let me ask my family's Rebbe. And they asked her Rebbe, and he says, yes, you can move to Israel. Okay, they moved to Israel. It was terrible. They lived in swamps. There was malaria, there was disease, there was infestation. It was horrible. He describes it in the book. They had a very large family in, I think it was Poland, as I recall. Very large family in Poland. I know his wife had like maybe 7 siblings, maybe his father had, I don't know, maybe 7 siblings. I don't remember the numbers. Very large families. And they come to Israel and they were all suffering. Everybody was killed in the Holocaust. They all died. They came to Israel. It was secular. Listen, we can't tell God how to run his world. I would have preferred that Israel was established by Sepharadi, Talmudic Chachamim, coming from Syria, coming from Turkey, coming from Morocco, and it'll be all Batei Knesset, and That's what I would have liked. Yeah, honestly, I would have liked it. But I got to tell you, I live in America, and things don't look very good right now. I don't know who's going to win the election. I don't know what's going to happen. But if I have to go back to Israel, I'm going to go back to Israel. It's going to be my country. It's going to be the country I live in. So this whole idea of, Zionism, anti-Zionism, I don't know. I mean, figure it out, but understand there's consequences to stupidity. It's consequences, okay? Now this whole idea that, yes, we would serve in the army if it was a religious thing. Where do we see this criteria in the halakha? Where do we see Rambam saying, yes, if it's Malchut Bet David, and he's maniach tefillin shel Rashi v'maniach tefillin shel Rabbeinu Tam, then you have to go save the Jewish people because the enemy wants to kill you. But if he's not maniach tefillin shel Rashi v'shel Rabbeinu Tam, and the enemy wants to kill you, you don't have to defend yourself. Now, if somebody has a functional prefrontal cortex, I think they may question that latter argument. I mean, the whole thing is absurd. The Goyim want to kill the Jewish people. Ma lo muvan. What is so mysterious? No, but it's a secular government. Wow. I mean, this is the level of dialogue. Are these serious people? You want to go back to Poland, Chief Rabbi? Where do you want to go back to? You tell me. I don't know. Is there some magical island somewhere with unicorns and rainbows and gumdrops coming out of the sky? Let me know about it. I don't know about that place, though. So this whole thing is farcical. I mean, the intellectual level of debate, is it religious or irreligious or Bibi Netanyahu? Just, what? I don't have time for that.
Fair enough.
Yeah, fair enough.
No, I mean, you can continue asking me questions. I want you to feel comfortable asking me questions within the time limit, but the point is, honestly, I can't take these types of arguments seriously.
Of course, and I've gotten into discussions with anti-Zionist Haredim online, and I usually stump them with very simple point. Do you celebrate Hanukkah? Yes. And that's it. There's the answer right there. That's it. How can you say, like there was someone else occupying the land. Why did you fight back? Why did we fight back? Why are we celebrating fighting back? If the Goyim are supposed to have it, and according to you, you're supposed to wait for the Navi, and you're supposed to wait for the fulfillment of the Nevuah. So just let it be, right? But no.
I mean, and that's another thing. So you have this belief that Beit HaMikdash will come from the sky. I'm all for it. I would love it. Be the best. Wouldn't it just be great? Maybe if you have a few unicorns, flying around, it'd be even better. Okay, fair enough. But the Goyim are trying to kill us.
Yeah.
They want to kill the Jewish people. You see the anti-Semitism in Harvard, in Columbia University, in Cornell. They are saying, we don't like you, Mr. Jew. We want to kill you. In Israel, they are trying to enter Israel, not because they want to have falafel on Dizengoff Street, because they want to kill everyone. And you're having an argument, well, I'm anti-Zionist. Okay, congratulations. Maybe you should read this book and see what happened to the people who are anti-Zionist.
Yeah, very good point.
To be fair, I've spoken to a few Haredim recently, and I've noticed, I'm talking about from I'm not talking about the leaders, we're talking about just, the regular people. People have mentioned that they are a little bit, even people who are wholeheartedly on the, Gedolim train and on the Torah train and on the, anti-Zionist train, they do say right now, like, that they're extremely tired of the rhetoric that's coming out. Like, what's going on in Israel, theoretically, it should transcend this type of conversation, which is your point, which is exactly what you're saying. People are trying to kill us. Like, this is not the time for, you know what I mean? Like, Pilpulim and
Right.
Zionism. It's people are trying to kill us. We're all Jews. We got to do something.
Yes.
Even I think that from the laymen within the Haredi world, the people who are just, the average, good meaning person. I think
there are many of those, by the way. I have to say there are many of those, of course.
Of course. And I've noticed this kind of like, it's kind of like they just kind of like, they don't want to say like oh, like, the leaders are wrong. They don't want to go that far. They don't want to say that, but it's more like, like, I really just don't want to talk about this anymore. Like it's their way of essentially conceding the point without having to actually say it.
Yeah.
And I think that this is interesting because we've talked about this in the podcast a few times, how if change comes from leadership, but sometimes it has to come from the bottom up. People have to stir the noise.
It has to be a grassroots kind of thing.
Sometimes there's a grassroots type of phenomenon that has to happen to give the leaders a reason to change their perspective.
So I'd like to address that, and maybe we should wrap it up with this positive note, because there's a lot to be positive about. You asked me questions, I answered them, but there's a lot to be positive about. And I'd like to end with this positive note, if that's okay with you, because it's related to what you just said. First of all, I was talking about these structures. When I referred to the Haredim, I was talking about the institutions, and primarily the political institutions. There are many wonderful, and the vast majority of Haredim, and the vast majority of Chilonim, and the vast majority of Jews in Israel are wonderful people, and I love them. They're my brothers. They're our brothers. I feel a sense of unity with them at a very deep level. So whenever I go to Israel and I see them, I just feel so much joy. I'm talking about the leadership, whether it's religious, whether it's political. I'm talking about the institutions that cause people to live in poverty while, these people, well, you heard the story, I don't have to repeat it. But I want to tell you something my father used to tell me, because my father used, Alav Shalom, he was such a great man with so much knowledge, and we should talk about it maybe in a future podcast. But, he taught in a Chiloni institution. It was a law school, right? I mean, it wasn't Chiloni, but it was a law school. He was a professor of law. He was a professor of Talmud in Bar Ilan University, taught Talmud, Gemara, and he's a professor of law in Netanya Law School. And he was there for a few years. It's a shame he wasn't there for longer, because the people who went to his classes, he had hundreds of people in his classes. It was the most popular class in the law school. There were Chilonim there, and they were never before introduced to Judaism. And they literally fell in love with my father and his teachings. And when my father passed away, and some of them actually came to the funeral, I didn't know who they were, and they say, you don't understand what effect your father had on us as people. We never understood what the Torah is about. We never understood Judaism. And he taught it to us in such an intelligent way that it changed us as people. And I want to tell you something my father used to tell me. He used to tell me, Abe, the pasuk says, Emet me'eres tismach. The truth is going to come from the earth. What does that mean? It means you have leadership, and the leaders oftentimes are corrupt. But the people are going to wake up, and they're going to understand that, no, there's something wrong with the people up there. There's something wrong with the people who impose themselves upon us and tell us things that don't make sense in our minds. Like, oh, I'm anti-Zionist. We shouldn't be in the army because we're anti-Zionist. Okay, very good. So emet me'eres tismach means the people will wake up, right? God will wake up the people. And there's actually, we started with that Perek in Yeshaya, Perek Kaftet. And there's actually a pasuk that says that God will wake up the people. And maybe that's a nice way to end this part. If you give me a moment to find that pasuk, Yeshaya Perek Kaftet. Give me a second. I'm sorry, I hate making you wait like this, but I will find it here. Let's see, what should I use? Safari? No, Tanakh. Yeshaya in Nikud. Okay, here it is. Yeshayahu Perek Kaf Tet. Let's see. Okay, so you remember that how we started this discussion, and we said that Yeshaya is telling us we should all wake up, so to speak, and then the pasuk says that there's going to be a state of darkness. The wise men, the wise men will not have wisdom. And the intelligent people won't have discernment, right? It's going to be a terrible, terrible situation. what's happening among the Jewish people. But then it says, "V'shame'u bayom hahu hachereshim," people who are deaf, people who can't hear, they will begin to hear. Divrei sefer, they will be able to understand the words in the book, because again, we're sensitive to words, the wisdom of words. Ume'ofel ume'choshech, and from the depth of darkness, einei ivrim tir'ena, blind people will begin to see. I think that's what my father meant by emet me'eres tismach. He said a blind person is hopeless. The people above are telling him A, B, C. Repeat after me, A, B, C. How can you think anything else? And yet it will happen, right? V'yasefu anavim b'Adonai simcha, and the humble people who knew the truth all along, but they had to be quiet, and therefore they're very humble. They're going to be very happy, right? The evyonei adam b'kdosh Yisrael yagilu, and the poor, the people poor, meaning poor in knowledge, suddenly they will see the holiness of the God of Israel, and they will rejoice in this holiness. So I really think it's going to happen, right? It's the same perek in Yeshaya. It will happen, and I hope we see it in our lifetimes.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much.
This was
We hope to do, God willing, we'll do part 2 to cover some more topics within this subject. But as of now, we thank you so much. This was so important, and דברים היוצאים מהלב נכנסים ללב, right? Things that come from the heart enter the heart, and that's what we hope to accomplish with this, because הגיע הזמן.
Yep.
And Bezrat Hashem, we should see better times for the nation and for the Jewish people.
Amen.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
All the best.